Every perfect dish concealed another dangerous lie. Welcome to Clue Lore. I am your host, Vale. Share where you're listening from below. I truly appreciate every comment. Let's start. The trouble arrived at 11:40 in the morning, which was inconsiderate. At 11:40, Nero Wolfe is not available to trouble, tragedy, romance, commerce, or the President of the United States, unless the President has learned to cultivate orchids and can speak intelligently about the genus Miltonia. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms, where the air was wet enough to make a sensible man confess to crimes he had never committed, and I was in the office below pretending to work. Pretending is not the same as loafing. Loafing requires peace of mind. I had the morning mail open on my desk, 3 bills, 2 circulars, 1 invitation to a lecture on civic virtue, and a cream-colored envelope so thick it could have stopped a small-caliber bullet. It was addressed to Nero Wolfe, in a hand that had been paid for, not learned. The return address was embossed: the Vassos Institute of Culinary Arts, West 54th Street. I slit it open, because I am paid to protect Wolfe from interruptions, and that includes reading invitations before he can refuse them. Inside was a card, a folded letter, and a faint smell that made me stop. Not perfume, not cologne. Something green and sharp, like tarragon bruised between fingers. The card said, "Mr. Nero Wolfe is respectfully invited to serve as private arbiter in a matter concerning reputation, authorship, and fraud." That was a new one. People had asked Wolfe to find murderers, missing husbands, stolen necklaces, forged wills, blackmailers, runaway daughters, and once a parrot that knew too much. Nobody had ever invited him to arbitrate reputation, authorship, and fraud before lunch. The letter was signed by Julian Vassos, founder of the Institute, author of 6 cookbooks, owner of 3 restaurants, and, according to the newspapers, the man who had taught half of Manhattan how to burn garlic with confidence. He wanted Wolfe to attend a private luncheon the following day at the Institute. 5 people would be present. A sealed recipe manuscript would be opened. A disputed claim would be settled. Wolfe's fee would be whatever Mr. Wolfe considers appropriate. That last sentence had promise. At 4 minutes past 12, Wolfe came down from the plant rooms. He entered the office with the expression of a man returning from civilization to a frontier settlement. He crossed to his desk, lowered himself into his custom-built chair, and looked at me. "Anything?" "Yes. Bills, foolishness, and tarragon." His eyes moved half an inch. "Indeed." I handed him the letter. He read it once, slowly. Then he read it again, which meant either interest or indigestion. When he finished, he placed the letter on his desk and leaned back. "No, you haven't heard the fee. I have read the ambiguity. It is vulgar. Most money is," he grunted. I said, "Julian Vassos is not nobody. Restaurants, books, television, rich students, richer donors. He wants you to settle a quarrel over a recipe manuscript. That sounds harmless. Pfui, a quarrel over food is never harmless." That was Wolfe all over. A man could be shot in his hallway and Wolfe might object to the blood on the rug, but tamper with a sauce and you were tampering with civilization. He tapped the letter with a finger. "This odor, you noticed it?" I said tarragon. "No, tarragon and something else." I leaned over and sniffed the envelope again. "Ink? Paper? Expensive vanity?" "Malice," Wolfe said. I looked at him. "That one I missed. It was delivered by hand." "Yes. No stamp. Who brought it?" "Fritz took it from a messenger. Young, no uniform, gone before Fritz could admire him." Wolfe shut his eyes. "That can mean he is thinking, sleeping, or refusing to acknowledge the decline of mankind." After 10 seconds he opened them. "Telephone Mr. Vassos. Tell him I will not attend his luncheon." I reached for the phone. "Also tell him," Wolfe added, "that he may come here at 6 o'clock this evening, alone, with the manuscript unopened." I put the receiver down. "That sounds like taking the case." "It is not a case." "Good. Then I'll tell him we don't take cases before dinner." "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Telephone." So I did. Julian Vassos had a voice like warm butter poured over steel. He was delighted, relieved, honored, and only slightly offended when I told him Wolfe would not set foot in his institute. He agreed to come at 6. Alone, I emphasized. With the manuscript. Unopened, I repeated. There was a pause. Then he said, Mr. Goodwin, has Mr. Wolfe already formed an opinion? Mr. Wolfe forms opinions the way other men breathe. The trick is getting him to share one. I see. He didn't. But he would. At 6 exactly, the doorbell rang. I went to the hall and opened the door on a compact man in a charcoal suit, silver hair combed straight back, and eyes that had been trained to smile without relaxing. He carried a leather portfolio under his left arm. Mr. Goodwin? Archie Goodwin. Mr. Vassos? He nodded and stepped in. Behind him, the March evening had teeth. I shut the door and took his hat. He glanced around the hall, as if rating it for service, atmosphere, and probable wine list. The famous brownstone, he said. It behaves better when not flattered. That got me a look. Not amusement, measurement. I took him to the office. Wolfe was behind his desk, seated and immense, with a book closed beside his blotter and a beer glass within reach. He did not rise. He never does unless the house is on fire, and even then he would first want evidence. Mr. Vassos, Wolfe said. Mr. Wolfe, sit down. Vassos sat in the red leather chair and placed the portfolio on his knees. Wolfe looked at it. Is that the manuscript? Yes. Unopened, as instructed. Who sealed it? My late wife. That landed with a little more weight than he intended. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. When? 3 years ago, before her death. And now you wish it opened. I wish a lie ended. Wolfe's lips pressed together. That is rarely the same thing. Vassos looked from Wolfe to me and back again. My wife, Elena, created 12 recipes before she died. They were meant to complete her final book. One of them, the most valuable, the one that made her reputation privately among chefs, has been claimed by another. Who? My former protégé, Celeste Armand. On what basis? She says Elena stole it from her. I whistled, not loudly. That's a strong seasoning. Vassos ignored me. Tomorrow, at my institute, 5 people expect to see the manuscript opened. If the recipe is there in Elena's hand, dated before Celeste's claim, the matter ends. And if it is not, Wolfe asked. Vassos's smile disappeared. Then my wife's name will be dragged through filth by people who owe her everything. Wolfe reached for his beer, took a swallow, and set the glass down precisely. Why bring it to me? Because I no longer trust anyone who wants to be present tomorrow. That includes you. Vassos stiffened. Wolfe said, Do not waste indignation. It is a poor substitute for candor. For the first time, Vassos looked less like a famous chef and more like a tired widower who had spent 3 years guarding a locked door. There have been incidents, he said. What incidents? A file missing from my office. A note moved from one drawer to another. Yesterday, a jar of Elena's private spice blend was opened. Someone had replaced the contents with salt. Wolfe's head came forward 1 inch. Salt? Yes. In what jar? Vassos hesitated. The tarragon jar. Wolfe looked at me. I looked at the envelope on his desk. The room, which had been perfectly ordinary a moment before, suddenly seemed to have admitted one more person than had entered with me from the hall. Not a ghost. Worse, an intention. Wolfe said, Mr. Vassos, you will leave the portfolio here. No. The word came too fast. Wolfe's brows lifted. No, I cannot. That manuscript is the last thing of Elena's that has not been touched. It has already been touched. Vassos stared at him. Wolfe pointed at the envelope. The letter you sent me carried tarragon. Not by accident. Someone wished me to smell your quarrel before I heard it. Vassos's face went pale in a controlled way, as if even his blood observed etiquette. That is impossible. Nothing useful is impossible. Only inconvenient. I moved closer to the portfolio. Who knew you were writing to Wolfe? No one. Wolfe's eyes stayed on him. Then either you are mistaken, or you are lying. Vassos stood up. That was a mistake. Men stand in Wolfe's office for many reasons. Anger, pride, escape, drama. None of them works, Wolfe said. Sit down. Vassos sat. For the next 20 seconds, nobody spoke. The house was quiet. Somewhere below, Fritz was doing something lawful and fragrant with butter. In the office, Julian Vassos held a dead woman's manuscript on his knees, as if it might bleed through the leather. Finally, Wolfe said, "You will leave it here, because if you take it away, it may vanish, be altered, or become the excuse for a more serious offense. Mr. Goodwin will give you a receipt. Tomorrow at noon, the interested parties will come here, not to your institute. I will open the manuscript in their presence." Vassos swallowed. "Here? Yes. The others will object." "Excellent. Objections are often informative. And if one refuses, then he or she is either innocent, frightened, or culpable." "Mr. Goodwin will determine which," I said. "Nice of you to include me." Wolfe ignored that. "Names." Vassos's fingers tightened on the portfolio. "Celeste Armand," he said. "My former protégé. Brilliant, ambitious, injured by every slight real or imagined. Bernard Vale, my publisher, who wants scandal if scandal sells. Nina Kroll, Elena's assistant, who knew every page of her notes. Marco Devlin, my executive chef, who believes loyalty should be rewarded with ownership. And Dr. Paul Rayner, trustee of the Institute, who financed the archive and now treats memory as an asset." Wolfe grunted. "A compact stew. With poison in it," I said. Vassos looked at me sharply. I shrugged. Figure of speech. But it wasn't. Not quite. Not in that room. Not with the tarragon smell still faintly rising from the envelope. Wolfe extended his hand, palm up. After a long moment, Vassos gave him the portfolio. Wolfe did not open it. He placed it on his desk as if it were a bomb with literary aspirations. "Archie, the safe." I took the portfolio, wrote the receipt, and locked it away. When I returned, Vassos was standing again, but this time Wolfe allowed it. "At 11 tomorrow," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin will escort your guests here. You will instruct them that absence will be interpreted." "Interpreted how?" Wolfe leaned back and closed his eyes. "Unfavorably." Vassos left at 6:31. I watched from the front window until his cab turned the corner. When I came back, Wolfe was looking at the envelope. "You like him for it?" I asked. "I dislike him for several things. That is not evidence." "Do we have evidence?" "We have seasoning. That's a start." "No," Wolfe said. "That is an insult." He rang for Fritz and asked what was for dinner. The brownstone had been disturbed. Wolfe had admitted it without saying so. A stranger's quarrel had crossed the threshold, carrying tarragon, grief, vanity, and malice in one expensive envelope. And when Wolfe takes an insult personally, somebody usually regrets having manners enough to deliver it by hand. The next morning had the decency to arrive grey, which suited the case. Sunshine would have been vulgar. At breakfast, Wolfe said nothing about Julian Vassos, tarragon, manuscripts, or malice. He ate shirred eggs with black butter, mushrooms, and a small mountain of toast, while reading a book on plant pathology. That was his way of announcing that the matter was serious. When a thing is trivial, he complains. When it is serious, he reads. At 10:30 I had my instructions. They were simple, which meant they would be troublesome. "Bring them," Wolfe said. "All 5? All who will come. And if one refuses, find out why." That is the kind of order that looks neat on paper and grows teeth in the street. Julian Vassos had already telephoned the 5 chosen victims and told them the luncheon had moved from his institute to Wolfe's office. I spent the next hour collecting reactions. Celeste Armand laughed and said she would not miss it. Bernard Vale asked whether reporters would be present, which told me his soul had a price and probably a discount schedule. Nina Kroll said yes, in a voice so faint I nearly asked if she was calling from under furniture. Marco Devlin swore in 2 languages and agreed in 1. Dr. Paul Rayner wanted to know by what authority Wolfe had inserted himself into institute business. "By the authority of having the manuscript," I told him. That got him. By 11:40 they had begun to arrive. Celeste Armand came first. She was tall, thin, and arranged rather than dressed, in a dark suit that looked like it had been designed by someone who disliked softness. Her hair was black, her mouth was red, and her eyes took inventory before I had shut the door. "So this is where great men hide," she said. "Only one great man." "I'm management," she smiled without warmth. "You must be Archie Goodwin." "Must I?" "I was warned. By a friend. By Mr. Vassos. Then he still has one." She liked that less than I liked saying it. I put her in the front room. Bernard Vale came next, round, polished, and fragrant, with shaving lotion. He had a publisher's handshake, hearty enough to imply trust, soft enough to retract it. He asked 3 questions before removing his coat. Whether Wolfe would make a statement, whether the dispute might produce litigation, and whether I had ever considered writing memoirs. "I'm saving the good parts until everyone is dead," I said. "Splendid angle," he murmured. Nina Kroll arrived 2 minutes later, carrying a brown handbag in both hands like a shield. She was small, pale, and probably younger than she looked, though worry had been doing overtime on her face. When I said her name, she nodded but didn't speak. "You worked for Elena Vassos?" "For 9 years. Then you knew the manuscript." Her fingers tightened. "I typed some pages. Not that one." "Which one?" She looked past me toward the office door. "The recipe everyone wants." Marco Devlin saved me from pressing her. He came in broad-shouldered, red-haired, and angry at the architecture. He gave the hall a glance and snorted. "This is nonsense. Julian should have kept this at the Institute." "Then you'd be at the Institute," I said. "I have a kitchen running. Many men do. Few use it as an alibi before noon." He gave me a look that would have browned onions. I liked him immediately, which meant nothing. Dr. Paul Rayner arrived last, exactly at noon, with Julian Vassos beside him. Rayner was a lean man with a silver beard, trimmed to a point, and eyes trained by committee meetings. He carried himself as if every chair he sat in became a board seat. "This proceeding," he informed me, "has no formal standing." "Neither does lunch, but people show up," Vassos said. "Please, Paul." That please had history in it. I escorted them all into the office. Wolfe was at his desk, immovable, with the leather portfolio before him and the envelope with its tarragon ghost lying beside it. The chairs had been arranged in a half-circle. The suspects noticed that. People always notice when they are placed rather than seated. Wolfe looked at them one by one. Miss Armand, Mr. Vale, Miss Kroll, Mr. Devlin, Dr. Rayner, Mr. Vassos. "You are here because a dead woman's work has become a weapon." I dislike weapons. I especially dislike them when they are disguised as art. Celeste crossed her legs. "I am here because Elena Vassos stole from me." Vassos made a sound, but Wolfe lifted a hand. "You will have your turn. You will all have turns. You may lie if you must, but do not babble." That settled the room better than a gavel. Wolfe opened the portfolio but did not remove the sealed packet inside. It was wrapped in cream paper, tied with blue ribbon, and sealed with red wax. Across the front, in slanted handwriting, was written, "For Julian, when appetite has forgiven grief." Nina Kroll made a small noise. Vassos shut his eyes. Wolfe said, "Is this your wife's hand?" Vassos nodded. "Yes." "Miss Kroll?" "Yes," she whispered. "Miss Armand?" Celeste's mouth hardened. "Yes." Wolfe turned the packet slowly. The wax seal was intact. Then he stopped. His eyes moved to the lower fold. "Archie." I went behind his desk. He pointed. There, near the bottom edge, was a narrow smear, almost invisible, unless you had Wolfe's talent for making dust feel guilty. I bent closer. Green. Not ink. Not wax. Tarragon. Wolfe leaned back. "Mr. Vassos, when did you last examine this packet?" "Yesterday morning." "Was that stain present?" "No." "Are you certain?" "Yes." "Then the packet was handled after you examined it." Rayner said sharply. "Handled by whom?" Wolfe looked at him. "That is not yet known. Your eagerness is noted." Marco Devlin stood halfway up. "Are you saying someone opened it?" "I am saying someone touched it." "Sit down." Marco sat. Celeste's smile had vanished. Bernard Vale had taken out a small notebook. I took it from him. "Hey!" "No souvenirs," I said. Wolfe regarded the packet for another long moment, then placed both hands flat on the desk. "I shall not open it." That produced a full set of reactions. Vassos stared, Celeste laughed once. Raina objected. Marco cursed softly. Bernard looked disappointed, and Nina looked relieved. That last one interested me. Wolfe said, "The purpose of this gathering was to settle authorship. That purpose has been superseded. Someone has brought contamination into my house. My wife's manuscript," Vassos began, "is safer unopened. For the moment." Celeste leaned forward. "Convenient. The great Nero Wolfe refuses to reveal that Elena was a thief." Wolfe's eyes moved to her. "Madam, if Elena Vassos was a thief, I shall say so. If you are a liar, I shall say that. I recommend patience. It may improve your posture." Her face colored, but she shut up. Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, the safe again." I took the packet. As I did, the faint green scent rose from it. Tarragon, yes, but now I caught what Wolfe had caught yesterday. Something sharper underneath, not spice, not food. Bitter almonds. I looked at Wolfe. He saw that I had smelled it. "Proceed," he said. I locked the packet away, and when I returned the room had become colder, without any help from the weather. Wolfe said, "You will each remain available today. Mr. Goodwin will speak with you separately. If any of you attempts to leave the city, destroy papers, warn another, or improve upon yesterday's performance, I shall react." Bernard Vale asked, "How?" Wolfe picked up his beer glass. "Effectively." That ended the meeting, but not the morning. They left in pieces. Bernard first, eager to tell no one officially, Celeste with her chin high, Marco muttering, Raina stiff as a legal document, Nina last, slow and white-faced. At the door she stopped and looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes?" "Elena never wrote that line." "What line?" She swallowed. "When appetite has forgiven grief." She would never have written that. Then she was gone. I went back to the office and found Wolfe sitting with his eyes closed. "Well," I said, "the dead woman's handwriting is right. The seal is right. The package smells wrong. And Nina says the message is fake." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Not fake," he said. "Composed by someone who knew her hand but not her mind. That narrows it. To someone intimate, vain, and careless. In this crowd, that may not narrow it enough." "No," Wolfe said, "but it seasons the broth." Then he rang for Fritz, not for lunch but for coffee. That was when I knew the day had officially gone bad. Fritz brought the coffee on a silver tray, with the expression of a man who had already decided the world would have been more civilized if everyone had stayed home. Wolfe accepted the cup without comment, inhaled once, and then fixed me with the look that meant I was about to earn my salary. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "The interviews. I had a feeling you weren't volunteering. You have youth. Employ it." "I keep trying." He ignored that. "You will begin with Miss Armand. Then Mr. Devlin, Mr. Vale, Dr. Raina, Miss Kroll last. The order matters? Everything matters. Even coffee. Particularly coffee." I left before he could improve my education. Celeste Armand had returned to the institute after the gathering, and I found her in one of the demonstration kitchens. Stainless steel counters gleamed beneath bright lights. Copper pans hung in disciplined rows, and 3 culinary students pretended to polish equipment while plainly listening. Celeste dismissed them with a glance. "So," she said, folding her arms, "the famous legwork begins. It usually begins with someone telling me they're innocent. I don't need to. That saves time." She smiled faintly. "You think I forged Elena's inscription? I think somebody did." She admired theatrical gestures. "That inscription isn't theatrical enough. That isn't what Nina Kroll said." Her expression flickered. "Nina always confused devotion with understanding. You knew Elena well. I worked beside her for 6 years. And then I stopped being content with applause that belonged to someone else. There it was, not bitterness exactly, but something polished by years of repetition. You've claimed the signature recipe was yours." "It was. How did Elena steal it?" Celeste walked to a preparation table where a wooden cutting board lay beside a bowl of fresh herbs. She picked up a sprig of tarragon. "Do you cook, Mr. Goodwin? I can open canned soup without legal representation." She almost laughed. Elena tasted this in my apartment 12 years ago. My sauce, my proportions, my balance. She praised it. And a year later, she demonstrated the same recipe privately before publishers. You have proof? My notebooks. Original. Yes. You've shown them? To Julian. He said memory was unreliable. Is it? It depends whose memory is profitable. She laid the tarragon down carefully. One more thing, I said. Who knew Vassos had contacted Wolfe? I didn't until yesterday morning. You're sure? Yes. She held my eyes steadily enough that I couldn't catch even a wrinkle of uncertainty. That didn't make her truthful. It merely made her experienced. My next stop was Marco Devlin's kitchen. Unlike Celeste's immaculate classroom, Marco's kingdom breathed. Sauces simmered. Knives struck rhythmically against boards. Cooks moved with choreographed urgency. Marco himself stood over a stockpot, tasting from a spoon. "You're in the way," he said. "I'll try to improve." "You won't." He waved me toward a corner where the noise softened. "You're loyal to Julian," I began. "I owe him everything." "Everything? My career. That's expensive." He found me washing dishes. "And now I'm executive chef, but not partner." His jaw tightened. "You're asking publishers questions." "No, publishers' questions start with royalties." He folded a kitchen towel. "I never cared about Elena's recipe. You expect me to believe that. I cared about the restaurant surviving. If Julian's reputation collapses, it hurts all of us. But it helps someone." Marco nodded reluctantly. "Celeste, you think she's lying. I think she enjoys revenge. Anyone else?" He hesitated. "Raina. That surprises me." "It shouldn't." "Why?" "He talks about legacy, archives, endowments. He doesn't care about recipes. He cares about ownership." As I left, I noticed something hanging beside Marco's office desk, a framed photograph. Julian Vassos, Elena, Marco, Nina Kroll, and, standing just a little apart from the others, Dr. Paul Rayner. Interesting. Bernard Vale received me in his publishing office with enthusiasm usually reserved for best-selling manuscripts. "My dear Goodwin." That greeting makes me nervous. It should. He offered coffee. I declined. "You're making inquiries," he said. "I've developed the habit. You'll discover that culinary geniuses are dreadful business people. And publishers? We merely organize the disasters." He leaned back comfortably. "Elena's final book would have been magnificent." "Would? If the disputed recipe proves genuine. You sound disappointed either way." He smiled. "Controversy sells." I thought so. He didn't deny it. "Did you ever see the sealed manuscript?" "Never." "Did anyone besides Julian know where it was kept?" "I imagine several people." "You imagine?" I was never told. His answers were polished enough to skate on. When I rose to leave, Bernard said casually, "One small observation. I collect those." Elena hated waste. "So, she never tied packages with blue ribbon." I looked at him. "You're sure?" "I published 6 of her books." Another detail, another pebble in Wolfe's growing pile. Late afternoon found me at Dr. Paul Rayner's office, overlooking the Institute gardens. He remained standing throughout our conversation. "This investigation is becoming excessive. Those are usually the interesting ones. You're distracting everyone from the actual issue, which is authorship. I thought it might be forgery." He adjusted his glasses. "You suspect me. I suspect everyone. Saves favoritism." His voice remained calm. "Elena entrusted many documents to me." "Did she?" "Yes." "Then why not this manuscript?" "Because sentiment clouded Julian's judgment." "Did you advise him to donate it?" "Repeatedly. To the Institute, to history." I wandered toward a bookshelf while he spoke. Awards, photographs, academic journals. One photograph caught my attention. It showed Elena speaking at a symposium. Standing behind her, almost unnoticed, was Nina Kroll, holding a leather portfolio, very much like the one now locked in Wolfe's safe. Rayner noticed me studying it. "That was taken 4 years ago. I like old pictures. They remind us how unreliable recollection can be. Sometimes," he smiled politely. "But documents endure." so long as nobody rewrites them. That ended the visit. By the time I reached the brownstone, dusk had settled over the city. The office lights were on. Wolfe sat precisely where I had left him, reading while Fritz arranged the dinner table in the dining room. "Well?" Wolfe asked, without looking up. I gave him everything in order. The conversations, the contradictions, the blue ribbon, the disputed inscription, Marco's loyalty, Bernard's commercial instincts, Rayner's obsession with archives, Celeste's certainty, and the photograph showing Nina carrying a portfolio years earlier. Wolfe listened without interruption. When I finished, he closed his book. "Excellent. That sounds encouraging. It is discouraging. How? Each has supplied one truthful statement. And truth, selectively distributed, is frequently more dangerous than lies." I sat down. "Nina last." "Yes. You expected that." "I did." "Because she's frightened?" "No." He folded his hands. "Because she knows which memory is genuine." The telephone rang. I answered. The voice on the other end was barely above a whisper. "Mr. Goodwin? Nina?" "Yes." She sounded as though she had locked herself inside a closet before making the call. I remembered something. "I'm listening." "The tarragon. It wasn't Elena's favorite herb." A pause. She couldn't stand it. Before I could ask another question, I heard a sharp crash somewhere beyond her, followed by a muffled gasp. "Nina?" Silence. "Nina!" The line went dead. I was already reaching for my hat when Wolfe spoke. "Go. You heard?" "I heard enough." "What do you think happened?" Wolfe's gaze settled on the closed safe that held Elena Vassos's manuscript. "I think," he said quietly, "someone has become afraid of a woman who finally remembered the correct flavor." Morning arrived with a thin rain that polished the brownstone windows and discouraged unnecessary optimism. Wolfe had already finished breakfast and spent his customary hours in the plant rooms. When he descended at 11, he found me waiting with the brass key Marco Devlin had discovered. "You were punctual," he observed. "I had help. Anxiety is an excellent alarm clock." He grunted. "Proceed." The institute was unusually quiet. Julian Vassos had followed Wolfe's instructions to the letter. No one had been admitted to Elena's former office. The desk remained where it had stood for years. Elegant walnut worn smooth by long use. The brass key fit a tiny lock hidden beneath the center drawer, the false bottom lifted with scarcely a sound. Inside rested a flat cedar box, tied with plain linen cord. No wax, no theatrical inscription. Only 3 words written in Elena Vassos's unmistakable hand. For the truth. I carried the box directly back to the brownstone. By 1 o'clock, every principal in the affair sat once more in Wolfe's office. Julian Vassos looked exhausted. Celeste Armand was composed but tense. Bernard Vale's notebook remained in his pocket, thanks to my earlier lesson. Marco Devlin sat rigidly. Nina Kroll watched the cedar box as though she had recognized an old friend. Dr. Paul Rayner alone appeared confident. Wolfe rested one hand upon the cedar box and the other upon the still-sealed manuscript. "You have all devoted remarkable energy," he said, "to persuading me that the manuscript contains the solution. It does not." No one interrupted. "The manuscript became valuable only because someone wished it to distract attention from something else." He untied the linen cord. Inside lay several handwritten notebooks, loose pages, and a sealed envelope. Wolfe opened the envelope first. He read silently for nearly a minute. Then he handed the pages to me. "They are for you, Archie. Read aloud." I looked at the signature. Elena Vassos. The room seemed to contract. I began. "If this letter is ever required, it means memory has failed the living. The disputed autumn reduction was created by Celeste Armand. She prepared it in my apartment after a charity dinner. I admired it greatly, and later developed my own variation. They are related but not identical. If anyone claims otherwise, they mistake influence for theft." Celeste closed her eyes. Julian lowered his head. I continued. "Should anyone attempt to use my notebooks or unfinished manuscript to injure Celeste, they do so against my wishes." Bernard Vale shifted uneasily. Wolfe nodded. "The question of authorship is settled." Celeste spoke quietly. "She admitted it. She did." Julian looked at her. "I never knew." "No," Celeste replied. You never asked. Silence lingered until Wolfe tapped another notebook. But that, he said, was never the crime. His gaze settled upon Dr. Paul Rayner. You understood that this letter existed. Rayner smiled faintly. No, you did. That is speculation. No. Wolfe's voice remained calm. Elena entrusted portions of her archive to you. She also distrusted your habit of treating memory as property. She therefore concealed this box elsewhere. Rayner folded his hands. You cannot prove that. I can. Wolfe turned toward Nina. Miss Kroll. She nodded. Elena asked me never to tell anyone about the second compartment. Not even Mr. Vassos? She said, grief makes honest people careless. Julian shut his eyes. Wolfe continued. Dr. Rayner believed the manuscript was the only surviving record capable of resolving the dispute. Once he learned Mr. Vassos intended to open it under my supervision, he needed immediate confusion. He pointed toward the empty spice jar, the anonymous notes, then toward the sealed manuscript, the forged inscription, finally toward the green fragments preserved in an envelope, and the herb. Rayner remained perfectly still. Wolfe said, You scented everything with traces of tarragon because you believed the public associated Elena with sophisticated French cuisine. No, you were mistaken because you admired reputation more than the woman herself, Nina whispered. She hated tarragon. Yes. The mixture, Wolfe continued, contained mostly chervil and lemon balm, her actual preferences, with enough tarragon to deceive those who knew her only by reputation. Bernard Vale leaned forward. But why? To force haste, Wolfe answered without looking at him. If everyone became convinced the manuscript was in immediate danger, they would insist it be opened before anyone searched for additional records. Celeste turned sharply toward Rayner. You knew there was another archive. I suspected, he answered quietly. There, Wolfe said. The first candid statement you have made. Rayner's composure finally cracked. I was protecting the Institute. No, Wolfe replied. You were protecting your investment. Julian stared at him. You sent the anonymous letters. Yes. You frightened Nina. I merely wished to know whether she remembered anything. She did, Wolfe said. And that frightened you. Rayner's shoulders sagged. The Institute depended upon Elena's legacy. Scandal would have destroyed donations. If the manuscript had been opened immediately, no one would have searched further. You intended, Wolfe said, to preserve a profitable uncertainty. Rayner laughed once, bitterly. You speak as though reputation has no value. It has immense value. Wolfe's voice hardened by only a fraction. That is precisely why it should not be manufactured. No one spoke. At last Julian rose. He walked slowly to Celeste. For years, he said, I believed you were trying to steal Elena's work. Celeste answered just as quietly. And I believed you were protecting a lie. He extended his hand. I was protecting my grief. After a long hesitation, she accepted it. It was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Bernard Vale quietly closed his notebook without writing a word. Marco Devlin let out the breath he had apparently been holding for several days. Nina Kroll smiled through tears. Police officers arrived a short time later. Dr. Paul Rayner offered no resistance. His crime was not murder, but calculated deception, forged evidence, anonymous intimidation, tampering with documents, and an elaborate attempt to manipulate the resolution of the dispute for financial and institutional advantage. When the house had emptied, peace returned to the brownstone with surprising speed. Fritz announced dinner: roast duck, perfectly browned, potatoes crisp at the edges, fresh chervil in the sauce, not a trace of tarragon. Wolfe ate with the concentration of a philosopher testing a theorem. Only after coffee did he speak. Archie, yes? What was the greatest falsehood? Rayner's forgery? No. Then the manuscript? No. I surrendered. What? That everyone believed recipes preserve greatness. They don't? No. He placed his cup upon its saucer with great care. Recipes preserve meals. Character preserves reputation. Confuse the two, and one eventually poisons the other. I considered that while finishing my coffee. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, the brownstone had settled back into its proper rhythm. The orchids upstairs would be waiting for Wolfe tomorrow. Fritz would complain about the fish. The bills would continue arriving with admirable regularity. As for me, I filed the case under an appropriate title, not because someone had seasoned lies with malice, because, in the end, the truth had required nothing stronger than memory, and the good sense to know the difference between the flavor people expected and the one that actually belonged there.